stop sharing.
Yep. And now everyone may just get a little prompt about record, so you can go ahead and dismiss that. And now it's my great honor. We are very lucky to have with us um, the film director and producer, Rachel, and several of the cast members. So I will go ahead and I will give just a brief, oh, you know, tip of the iceberg intro to each one. We have more information on each of these folks in our chat. So you'll be able to see that as I go. But first, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to see the film, Rachel. Certainly very powerful for all of us that lived through the 2021 hunt. And certainly, I think at the end of the film, it definitely highlights, right, that right now our wolves in the state of Wisconsin are federally protected. I always look to the future. This is now a real question, right? So definitely something that without that federal protection, it will trigger the Act 169 of 2011 in our state that actually requires a wolf hunt. So that's something that I think we all have in the back of our minds. That's why that wolf plan by the DNR that was mentioned at the end of the film is also very important. So let's get into it. We have some questions, certainly looking back and forward focused. So first, we have Rachel Tilseth, who is the film director and producer. She's an art educator, a freelance writer, a filmmaker, and retired DNR volunteer winter wolf tracker. So, Rachel, thank you again for everything. We also have with us the one of the cast members that we saw actually lead the film off. Edith Leoso is a Bad River tribal member, retired Bad River Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, among many, many other things that we'll get that full bio in the chat for you. I'm not sure, Elizabeth, if you're able to pin Edith for us at the top, and we'll get to her in a moment. And then we have Marvin Defoe. He is a contributing author to the Myangan Relationship Plan and member of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. Uh, Marvin has spoken to us in the Sierra Club a number of times regarding the relationship with Myangan, and we just appreciate his wise words. And we saw him speak in the film around universal law. So we'll get to him, and we can go ahead and say thank you for joining us, Marvin. And then we also had Michael Price. He is the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Specialist at the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, often referred to as GLFWIC. Michael, we saw him in the film with his dogs and speaking to us about just the important lessons that we can take forward. So, Michael, thank you for being with us here tonight as well. And then lastly, Peter David. He's a retired wildlife biologist with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and he assists with GLFWIC's member tribes and the implementation of their off-reservation treaty and treaty reserved rights. And so we always appreciate his perspective and all that he has done for wolves over the course of his career. So that is our lineup of panelists this evening. And I want to say thank you so much for being here. I'll do my best to moderate and direct questions around, and we can get things started. So again, I'll just remind for everyone else, you can go ahead and you can put your question in the Q&A. It may be under the button that says more if you don't see it right away in your toolbar, but we're managing that. We've got some open and we'll start right away. So one of the first ones that we had here, Rachel, of course, was, as the kind of the inspiration and the reason we have this film this evening was, sort of where did you get the inspiration to bring this story forward? And where did you get all the beautiful wolf footage?
Voyager's Wolf Project. I donated to them and then they let me use the footage, which is really nice. The inspiration was really knowing wolves and tracking wolves for all the years I did and feeling like these animals don't deserve what has been happening to them, being, persecuted in these hunts. And also, I thought I've got to do something, when that horrible 2021 wolf hunt occurred, I thought, that's the inspiration right there. We need something needed to be done.
No, thank you for that. I would like to, if we could, Edith, I'd like to ask you one of the questions here. We have, you spoke about the connection between dogs and wolves, and I sit here with my wild corgi at my side, and I'm wondering, why do you think there's such a disconnect between the two for so many people, between the dog in their house and Mayangan in the woods?
Well, I think in the film, Jane Goodall touched a little bit on that, and that was about how we perceive the wolf today. We are conditioned to believe it's an awful being, you know, through film, through all kinds of different ways, books, um, you know, and so there we are, we see a wolf and right away we think it's going to kill us right off the bat. And instead, it's actually trying to help us live better as better human beings. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that uh, people have forgotten about the wolf.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Um, I think we have a question in the chat, and I think certainly on all of our minds is around what to do in the future. And I'll kind of ask, I'd like different perspectives on this. If I could, Peter David, for the future, now with the election results being what they are, um, what are your thoughts, forward thinking, so that we can move forward in the best way possible to avoid things like we had in 2021 here in our state?
Well, it's a big question. I certainly agree again with Jane Goodall, and that we need to tell our stories. I think you need to tell them in a non-confrontational way. And that ties into Pat Durkin's, is just tell the truth and get the truth of the wolf out there, move beyond sort of the mythical beast that exists, and tell the real story of the wolf, and tell it to your neighbor and tell it to your legislatures, and do that over and over again. And there's, on the other hand, there's a great number of groups like Sierra and many others that are promoting wolves and trying to get that story open and shared across the country. And I think it'll be a tireless effort for the next 4 years, but I think that's where it all starts.
I agree. I agree. I guess I'd like, if we could, Marvin, I guess I'd like your thoughts on forward actions. A lot of people, again, looking at wanting to help, not wanting to repeat history, wanting to move forward in the best possible way. Um, Marvin, what perspectives could you share with our audience tonight?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, they're eating our pets. They're eating our cats and our dogs and our calves. They're eating our pets. And I think it's just a myth of the Mayangan. You know, this I started out, Edith started out, the fear that people have, the misunderstanding of the Mayangan. And we heard that on national TV. It's the myth, they're eating our pets. We heard that, and there's a lot of rhetoric, misunderstanding going on about the Mayangan, and we got to find the opportunity to keep voicing what the Mayangan really is. I growing up and stuff. My dad, he always used to talk about walking a mile in somebody's shoes before you judge them. Walk a mile. And I'm saying walk a mile in the paw of a Maingan. See how the Maingan lives. See, understand how it lives. And I think at the same time, we're trying to understand each other. I really trying to understand what all the ranchers are going through. Understand what all the sportsmen are going through when they find it in themselves to go and hunt and kill a Maingan. I mean, why do you do that? Why? What's the reason? And I taught very much at an early age too, from my dad also. You kill something, you got to eat it. You got to eat it. And I've never tried to eat a Maingan because we don't kill them. So, but yet they're disrespected and killed. And I'm still trying to struggle and understand why they have a crow hunt here in Wisconsin too. I mean, I've never ate a crow. What do they do with all them crows? Do they eat them? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I've lived up here my whole life. I've never seen a Maingan huff and puff and blow my house down or blow somebody's house down. So I think there's myths out there with all that, with the Maingan. But I think it's time. I think it's time that we walk into the paws of the Maingan. Walk into the paws of the Maingan, just like you would walk into you want to understand somebody, walk a mile in their shoes. And I think that's where we're at in this country, is really trying to understand each other, because there's such a big separation with what we are trying to talk about here today, the coexistence with wolves and humans, coexist. How do we ever get to a point where we can have a mutual understanding of each other about this beautiful, wonderful animal? So that's my wish in the future. Sometime, somehow.
No, that makes sense. We need to find ways to come together. You're absolutely right. So thank you so much. And walking a mile in my Ingan shoes would possibly change a lot of perspectives. Thank you. I do have a question in the chat. And Michael, I would like to get just you in here chatting too. The question is, why were the wolves overhunted in 2021? For those that were maybe not as familiar, Michael, would you be able to shed some light on just the historical part of what happened in 2021? The question is, why were they overhunted? Was it just a blatant disregard for the quota?
Wow, very political question.
Yes.
Well, I remember that delisting the wolves was a campaign promise made by Donald Trump to get reelected. And he promised to do that. He didn't use science. He didn't use any type of knowledge from the DNR or from scientists. It was a campaign promise that he just enacted. And what's ironic about this is that the wolves were officially delisted in January 4th. And just 2 days after that was the insurrection on our nation's capital. And to me, I think there was just, and this is my own personal opinion, I think there was a lot of fervor that was built up, like take America back, make America great again, and how we're going to do that. Well, the only thing we got now available is let's go out and slaughter a bunch of wolves as a celebration. I mean, my response is pretty direct and pretty harsh, but I've thought about this a lot, and I think there was just a lot of fervor built up in the country. And then, when Donald Trump did not get elected, we took our rage, or took, I'm going to say I'm going to say they took their rage and frustration out on the wolves. So that's the best explanation I can give.
Sure, sure. No, thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And I think there were, in terms of the hunt itself, right, in 2021, there were contributing factors. In addition to just what you discussed, a lot of that pent up anger, frustration, um, at all levels. I think too, I'll just add to that in that there was fresh snow, we were using old plans, old rules, and so it was really just a really bad combination of everything coming together that led to that severe overharvest as quickly as it happened. And so that's what was particularly devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agree.
No, thank you so much. Rachel, I have a question for you in the chat, actually. Um, how did you decide how you were going to interview or work with people or cast people in the film?
Well, it just started, a network going, Um, Michael found Edith, and then I've known Peter forever, and also I wanted to get the hunter's view in there, and so with Patrick Durkin, I've known him for years too. I asked him if he'd be in the film. Um, yeah, so it just and Marvin, it just knowing people, and it's like this, you just start the ball rolling, and that's what we did. Finding people, getting, the interviews in there, and you never know what's going to happen at the end. And we were so fortunate to have this beautiful story. So that's just kind of takes on a life of its own, you just begin. And also when I was at the powwow at Red Cliff, Marvin went on and announced over the speaker that I was there and where I was. And so then we got some people coming over there too. So it was just, everybody, wanted to talk about the hunt. And, there was so much, people felt so angry and hurt over it, that I didn't have trouble finding people that wanted to talk about it.
That makes sense. Yeah, it was a tough experience. And I know a lot of people had opinions, right, wanting to share. So that makes sense. As we're going through the chat here, I have a question about, and this might be one for Peter. The question is, I wonder if Wisconsin is moving towards putting Myangan on the state endangered species list. Peter, I know you've been involved with the DNR and Glyphwick committees and representing a lot, working in policy. I know the Wisconsin endangered species list or what would be required for wolves or Myangan to be put on is pretty minimal. Can you speak to that at all?
I hesitate to speak on behalf of the state, but that would be extremely unlikely. They were on the state list once upon a time. They were taken off of it a long time ago. I don't even remember the year now, but many years ago, and the threshold is far lower than where the population is currently at. But it kind of speaks maybe to a greater point that there are a lot of people who feel that when wolves do come off the federal endangered species list, what we really need is something new on the landscape, something that'll provide some protection for them, even when they don't meet the definition of an endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act. That's sort of a real minimum threshold. That's always been described as getting them off of, out of a life-threatening situation, basically. And that's not recovery, and certainly in the sense of the Ojibwe's view of wolves and many people in the non-Ojibwe community. So, for bald and golden eagles, we had a special act to protect them because of their cultural significance. And there are a lot of people who feel that something like that needs to be created for Myangan and perhaps for other large carnivores, so that we don't have this crazy pendulum that takes place between being placed under the act and fully protected and then swinging off it and going under immediate attack, the way that we'll very likely see in Wisconsin again soon.
Yeah, I know. I know. Thank you, Peter. I go to next. I have a question for Michael. Michael, would you be willing to share some tech or oral stories about wolves that could help, I think, just sort of uplift or connect us a little bit more to the relationship with Maingan?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. Among our Ojibwe stories, we have this word called Gunaway Nindiwug. Gunaway Nindiwug, which means they take care of each other. And we had this beautiful story about Maingan, the wolf, and Gagagyu, the raven. And we believe that they have a sacred relationship that has sustained both of them for a very long time. So in the wintertime, when you're in the Northwoods here, usually if there's a carcass or a carrion out in the woods, it's froze solid. So the ravens are flying up overhead over the forest, and they're looking for food. Then they find this dead deer out in the woods. But the ravens aren't strong enough really to tear into that frozen flesh, that frozen carcass. So what the ravens will do is they'll light up in the trees above that carcass, and they'll start cawing. And they have a certain caw, and I don't know this. I know that the wolves recognize it. And when the wolves hear the ravens cawing, they start heading in that direction. And eventually the wolves will find that carcass. And immediately they begin to rip and tear and feed on that frozen carrion. Meanwhile, the ravens are sitting up in the tree just patiently waiting. Well, after the wolves have already gotten their fill, then they move on and leave the place. And now the ravens fly down out of the trees. They come and they begin to peck on the remaining bits of meat that's been left on the bones. So this relationship Anishinaabe people recognize is that the wolves take care of the ravens and the ravens take care of the wolves. And this relationship we see is a sacred relationship, and we try to learn from these stories, and we try to take these lessons and better our own lives as human beings, because many of us don't have those kind of relationships. And as Anishinaabe people, we're always seeking to learn from our teachers. And the wolf, Maingan, and Gagagyu, the raven, they are considered to be our teachers as well.
Oh, thank you. It's beautiful. And it always interesting to learn of the more complex relationships, right? Everything we find, we look out is connected, and that's, certainly so true. That's right. Thank you so much. I will remember that. We have another question. Rachel, we've got a few questions around accessibility of the film, where people may be able to see it, or is it available for others to see? I don't know what your plans are. I know right now you're kind of in the film festival and awards era of the film process. Will it be available in the near future for others that may want to also see this?
I'm working on that right now. It's been a good year in film festivals, and it's been in 10 film festivals from Montreal to Spain to Australia, and it's won 4 best documentary shorts, which is really, getting the message out there. I mean, and then it's gotten, quarterfinalists. So it's doing rather well. And that all helps the film get a distributor. So I do plan on getting a distributor, putting it on Film Hub, and it sits in this, online Film Hub, which you can go in and it's free. And then it's cataloged, and we have to put all these things in there, and, the requirements to have it in there. And then we have Netflix looking at it, and we have a bunch of them looking at it, and they may pick it up. Amazon. It was shown in Spain, and Amazon was watching it. So the message is getting out there. So as of now, it has one more festival, and then we begin the process of getting it out there, selling DVDs, t-shirts. I don't know. It's just, like I said, it's taking on a life of its own. And I'm so grateful for everybody that showed up to watch this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of interest, certainly, and praise for this. Um, Edith, I'd like to go back to you. I appreciate if you can. There, there's some questions around garnering support for non-lethal, right? So we can mitigate these conflicts between Maingan and humans and farmers and things. Do you have any thoughts around ways we can sway support for those things? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that first of all, thanks for having me on this too, as well. I think that just educating people, um, which it seems like a lot of people need to be educated. Uh, but just getting the it out there, and this film is what works to do that. So as soon as it can get public out there, people start understanding a different perspective of it, and but also, there are groups that are present. I just seen somebody in the chat too, that had to do with the coyote group, or not the chat, but that was on here. And I think that there's a lot of people organizing now, to be able to implement some strategies, for the future because of changes that are anticipated. So I think that just getting people educated about the wolf and how it can help the ecosystem, help them, be able to identify. I think I talked about it, in our interview, but it didn't make it into the film, about how Bad River had collared a wolf, and they watched him, from his collar. We were able to watch him walk into a barn filled with cows, and then walk back out again without any predation. And when they told me that, I said, well, there probably wasn't any sick cows in that barn. And so our wolf person at the time, she went and asked the farmer there, if he had any sick cows in that barn at the time, and he said, no, I didn't. And I said, there's one prime example of how Maingan helps us. It will, walk here and there if you're not sick, which I think some of us are here tonight. But it will, go out there and take care of those animals who are sick. We had a predation across the bay here once on a horse. And when asked, where was the horse? How did that horse be predated on? Because it's unheard of a horse ever being predated on by wolves. And because wolves don't like messing with them. What the owners did was they put him in a back 40, a back corral by itself. And so it was sick, and the wolf did predate on it. But we found out later on that, if they one of your animals are predated on by a wolf, then you can get that carcass taken care of. Whereas, it might have cost that owner of the horse owner something like $2,000 to $3,000 to be able to take care of that carcass, right? Here, you get it done for free if you leave it to Maingan, right? And so, but it also goes on the books that Maingan predated on a horse, you see? So there's different things that people need to be aware of. If your cattle are getting taken out by Maingan, more than likely those cattle are sick, and you probably shouldn't be, trying to sell the meat from those cattle. I don't know if there's any testing methodologies in place today for cattle to be tested for CWD or anything else. I don't know if anybody is working on that or moving towards that direction. Michael might know a little bit more about that. So, but it's something to think about, and think about having more wolf gatherings, to be able to educate the general public on Maingan.
Thank you. Yes, it does. It does all go back to education, and before we get to coexistence, I think we have a lot of work to do there. So thank you for that. We do have, I mean, the film really did kick off and talk about CWD, right? And the connection between wolves and CWD, wolves being in our state, in a place where there's very little CWD and where we don't have wolves, we have a lot of CWD, right? So we have that, and I think we all see that. A lot of folks on this, meeting understand that that alone is very factual and very important, that can't be overlooked. But I think when it comes to CWD and wolves, I guess I just like to hear, if we could, from maybe Michael and Peter a little bit more on why that is so crucial, of a connection to make for us going forward. So I don't know if Michael, you'd like to take a stab at that first.
Actually, I'd like to defer that to Peter because I know
Okay.
he's done a lot of work in that area.
Sure.
Well, that's really an overstatement, but chronic wasting disease is obviously a huge issue in Wisconsin, and it's a huge issue for subsistence hunters, like the Ojibwe, and so it's an important thing to understand. It's not an easy thing to study because, as you mentioned, where we have a lot of CWD, we don't have many wolves, and vice versa. And so it's a difficult thing to look at those overlap areas and get good understanding in a natural field condition of the impact of wolves on this disease. But modeling exercises, and everything we know about the general way that wolves hunt and how selective they are and what their digestive system is likely to do to prions when they pass through them, all tell us that while we need to study this, and there is a study I think that's underway right now cooperatively between Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and there may be other partners in there. I'm not intimately familiar with that research, but we need to do that work. We need to document this better to tell the truth about this animal. But there's also this part of being humble is that until we get better knowledge, do we assume that wolves don't have effect, or do we assume that they do? And when there's a great preponderance of ecological evidence that suggests predators in these situations do have positive impacts, it's really the conservative thing to assume that wolves are helpful. In the meantime, go build that science. But science always tends to lag behind some of these things. And we need, unfortunately, sometimes to make the best decision possible, lacking a total understanding of the biological impact. So are you going to be conservatives in those situations or not? And I think the nod should go to wolves, given everything we understand in a general ecological basis.
Yeah, if I can add to that too, I think that we as human beings have an incredible amount of fear of not just wolves, but nature in general. And even us who are supportive of wolves, I think if we were to see a wolf actually in the wild, it might be a very terrifying experience because we don't have any experience relating to wolves personally. And I think there's a lot of mistrust with much of the public about wildlife in general because we want to keep ourselves safe and because we've been pumped full of fear most of our lives about wild animals. And I think what's going to be required is an incredible amount of relearning and reprogramming some of our just more basic thought processes about our connection with nature. And I have to admit, I knew stories about the wolf, tribal stories, but in 2021, this whole experience with the wolf hunt changed me drastically as an individual. And now wolf stories were not only interesting now they were important. Now they were critical to me living on this planet with with our global community here. And I look at some of the political movements that's going on today. You know, um, I just learned not too long ago that the Biden administration was trying to delist gray wolves. Um, there's a lot of politics around the wolf, and of course, one of our traditional stories that Edith made reference to. What happens to the wolf happens to us. And for Anishinaabe people and for all indigenous people, I mean, this is kind of a wake up call to action, I think. So we have to be mindful. We have to be watching. But certainly we need to rethink and relearn our connection to the natural world.
Wow. Yes. Well, thank you both for that. Well said. And what I'd like to do, we're getting near time. What I'd like to do is just go around with everyone here on the panel and just briefly, if you could, we're gonna focus on looking forward. One thing you think people should really focus on to help with wolf conservation, understanding where we are right now. So if you want to take a moment and think about one thing you'd like, if there's a way you'd like to see people get involved, get engaged with this conversation and this issue moving forward, or advice, I guess, on where to start that. And then I also want to make note that there were some very detailed questions around the Wisconsin Wolf Management Plan that was approved in the chat. Rather than dig into all those details here and now with this amazing panel, what we'll do is we can follow up with those details via email, so you can kind of understand better where we are with our wolf plan in Wisconsin. So with that, Edith, I'll start with you. Wolf conservation people, we've got an audience here, people who want to help. Where would you like them to start? What can they do to help?
I think one of the things they can do to help is to be vocal about it. And being vocal with your state representatives, senators, is a really good start there. And letting them know how you feel about the things that may be changing, depending on what happens in the near future. So I think getting vocal with them now, before they're even sworn in or whatever, that they're aware of everything, how important it is, for the environment and for the hunters all around. Yeah, I think being vocal is going to be a really huge start there.
Thank you. Let's go to Rachel.
Well, first of all, one of the biggest things I learned from the film is the connection that the Ojibwe have with the wolf, and that they have coexisted with the wolf for centuries. And I would like people to maybe, understand that and learn from that. And I would really love to see a paradigm shift. The other thing is learning about, the dog that we have, our pets, and that relationship, and that they are the ancestors of all dog breeds, as Jane Goodall said, and to start understanding those connections. And, it's the biggest thing is fear, that people have. But I would like to see people talk with each other more and communicate those stories, because I'm telling a story. That's what I do. And I really believe people can talk about stories. I can tell stories about when I went wolf tracking and when first time I saw a wolf. And I think those are the biggest things that, people start talking to each other. Because I know when I'd be up in the woods, I'd have these people say, oh, would I be tracking? Oh, wolves, this and that, starting to condemn them. And I would start talking to them and I'd say, well, when did you see one? And start communicating with them. And I think that's the biggest thing we can do. And, I'm not so sure about politics anymore. I've kind of had it with that, you know, the way it's going, and it's good to talk to our legislators, and I think the biggest thing is we do need to change that law, that awful law that's on the books that says we shall hunt them, because that's wrong. That's totally wrong. Like Patrick said, we shouldn't be doing that. So I would like to see a shift in thinking. If people would you know, would understand more of the Ojibwe way. They have lived with wolves for centuries, and that, we have that shift in thinking, and that we communicate more with each other, tell those stories. I'm a filmmaker. If you have a story to tell, let me know.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. I'll offer that last comments on the same sort of what you'd like to add. I'm definitely hearing the need to be vocal and tell our stories and talk to one another. Peter, Michael, and Marvin, if there's anything you'd like to add, please jump right in.
Bonjour.
I'll go ahead, Marvin.
Bonjour. I've been pretty quiet here listening to everyone. I think I like the idea of t-shirts. Actually, I like that idea, and I think we need to generate a positive interest in the pa of the Maingan. And I'm not too sure on giving up yet on the politicians, because it seems like the wolf hunt in Wisconsin was initiated by politicians, by the DNR board, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a little concerned at a national level with the delisting of the gray wolf. I mean, that not only affects us here in Wisconsin, it affects clear across the board in the United States. And the reason why I say that too is because some of them going to vote on something they don't even know what they're voting on. I ran into Tammy Baldwin. In fact, I could not believe that Tammy Baldwin was going to sponsor a bill to delist mine guns, and the co-author of that was Rick Scott, or what's his name, from Florida. Scott was going to co-author, and I just happened to run into her at our powwow this past summer. It just happened. I said, "Oh my God, that's Tammy Baldwin." So I went out there and talked to her. And Rachel, and not this one, but Rachel, I think that's when you were giving videotape that one. That was the summer before. But anyway, started talking to her about co-authoring that bill and trying to explain to her what we're talking about here today, and the different perspectives, of that mine gun. It's the perspective doesn't always have to come from a farmer, and Tammy, when I was talking to her, she never heard the story. Never heard the story. What happens to the mine gun happens to the Anishinaabe. She never heard that, and I was quite surprised that that she never heard that story. So I think a coalition initiative needs to happen so that we can go to the decision makers. I mean, a lot of people don't like politics, but guess what? That's where them acts of Congress come in. That's where you could make change. Maybe you could make some changes, what Peter Davids was talking about, some other initiatives in there. And I like the idea. It changed the mindset here in Red Cliff when we initially had the wolf management plan. And I just happened to be on that group, and I said, man, I don't know. I've never managed my brother, and I wouldn't want to try to manage my brother. But I tell you what, I'll protect him. I'll protect my brother. So we changed it to protection plan. And that just changed the whole mindset of of that plan. Just last week actually I got invited. It's going to be a national effort about talking about the conflicts of the wolf on the landscape, and I think it's being funded by the Fish and Wildlife Service. There's a group there trying to pull this all together, but that group went out, interviewed 7,000 people across the country about the conflicts with Maingan on the land state, with farmers and this and that. The whole, and they're going to have a session in Denver, Colorado in January to talk about conflict. This is what we're talking about here. And I got invited.
Are you going to be on that group?
Yeah, I got invited. I got invited to go to that group. I tried to get them to change it to go to Hawaii, but they wouldn't do it. I said, I don't want to go to Denver in the winter.
That is, that's very, very big news, Marvin. That's wonderful that your voice will be on that group. That, just a little context for folks that may not be as familiar. That's the national conversation that's being facilitated by U.S. Fish and Wildlife on perspectives on wolves. And I think it's a very, very, very small group that will be discussing and meeting in person and filmed, trying to bring people together, talk through things. And so, Marvin, for your voice to be on there, that's really wonderful news. So thank you for doing that. That will be exciting.
Yeah.
We'll be cheering you on.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm excited or not being thrown in the middle of all that, but I think that's what I'm saying. Trying to walk a mile in somebody's shoe. I've been trying, like I said earlier, trying to walk in the shoes of a sportsman. Wanting, what do they go through? I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah.
I'm understand just as well as I hope that we can have people uh, under, understanding our perspective. Our perspective on it.
Well, if there's anyone that can bring folks around on that meeting, that would be you. I'm really thrilled to hear that you'll be a part of that group. So that's exciting news for everyone, for sure. Thank you for doing that. And I'll just move quickly to Michael. Anything you'd like to leave final words of how to get involved, inspiration, motivation for the next couple of years?
I think that we have to be bold and courageous in standing up for the things that we believe in, especially as it relates to our four-legged non-human relatives. And I believe that there's an epidemic of complacency that we've let so many things slip by. We have a biodiversity crisis in this country. We have a climate crisis. We have a social crisis, and sooner or later, and Anishinaabe people learn this the hard way, that we're going to be forced to take action and to stand up, even in the face of sheer adversity. We need to do it. We need to preserve our way of life for the next 7 generations. And so being bold and courageous and standing for what you believe in, I believe, is what we should do for the future. Aho, miigwech.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And Peter, we'll wrap with you, and then I'll just have a couple quick little announcements to wrap us up.
Well, I think all the great points have been made, and they've been made in great ways. I'll just say that, there's very few species on the landscape whose future is so much in human hands as Mayankans. And so it really is important what we do. And it does go back to communication. What Rachel did in communication with this film is just incredible and outstanding. Most of us don't have that opportunity, but we can talk to our neighbor. We can reach out to somebody who's different than us, and we can listen to that person's story and we can tell them ours. And I think the truth will rise to the top when we do that.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone, all the participants hanging with us, and certainly our panelists for sharing their perspectives, opinions, views on this, and bringing to life the film and what we can do moving forward. So thank you all very, very much for your support this evening. Personally, I really am so grateful. Just from wrapping up from the Sierra Club, I will just add that, you know, if you've been moved to action by the discussion tonight, and I think many of you have, we'd like you to follow the advice of what we just heard from our panelists, to be vocal and to advocate. So we're going to be putting some links in the chat. Elizabeth's going to help me out with that, but we would like everybody, if you can, to take action. We've created a little bit of a pre-populated email that you can send to our governor, Tony Evers. We would like to have Governor Evers hear from us. Just think, it would be wonderful if all the folks that signed up for this presentation reached out to the governor and advocated for him to support wolves by nominating a DNR secretary that was committed to all the important elements of the new wolf plan and wolf rule, particularly around enforcing the subzones around reservations. So there's a low quota of wolves taken at the next hunt, making sure that there's a limit on the dog training that happens. And most importantly, that the plan is upheld with the best use of science and tribal input. So we have an email that will be very easy for you to personalize, read, send in a matter of seconds. So we'd like you to reach out and take that action tonight or as soon as you can. So be vocal starting right now. And then also we have just another couple quick things coming up. We have a very important celebration this Wednesday, actually at 7:30. We're going to be celebrating the bright spots across Wisconsin, all the people who make the world a better place here, both volunteers within the club and actually some that are not, some that we just want to recognize for doing really good things. So please know that you're all personally invited. I know it's been a rough couple weeks, and if you're looking for some inspiration and remembering that there are good people doing a lot of really good work across our state. It's a really inspirational evening and often brings me to tears. So I hope you can join us for that. So the link will be in the chat, also be sent to you via email tomorrow. So hopefully you can join us for that, celebrating some really important things, particularly a volunteer on our wildlife team that works for wolf protection. So that is coming up. And then we will always ask if you're interested in joining our wildlife team. Looking to Maingan, we know that we're stronger together. And so I would just like to extend, if you're interested in joining our wildlife team and being a part of our work, as Michael said, our bold, hopeful work here in the next few years, please think about considering your volunteering your time and getting involved and being a part of the conversation. So you're certainly welcome to join us. And then lastly, we certainly know there's a lot of interest around the film. We've got a link that we would like to share with you for the film. That's in the chat as well. You can stay in touch where that will be hopefully available and when and where you can see it and share it and view it again to take it all in. So that's there. We hope you'll stay in touch with Rachel and the film. And that is where we're at. I know we went just a little bit over time. I want to say thank you to everyone that hung with us. And please don't hesitate to reach out. We will be following up with an email. Elizabeth will be sending something out tomorrow, and we'll be in touch regarding any questions or follow-up you may have from that. So with that, I'll say good evening and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.